Hello everyone and welcome to our course in Contemporary World Civilizations. I'm your instructor for today. I'm Güneş, and today we'll be recapping Unit 6, which is titled The Islamic Civilization. After completing this chapter, you'll be able to comprehend the origin of the Islamic civilization, and then you'll be able to appreciate important features of the Islamic civilization. And thirdly, you'll be able to identify important developments in the timeline of the Islamic civilization. And lastly, you'll be able to discuss the contributions of the Islamic civilizations to the other countries and civilizations. For the first part, we can say that Islam was destined to be a world religion and a civilization stretched from one end to the globe to the other. Early Muslim caliphates, empires, first the Arabs, then the Persians, and later the Turks, set about to create classical Islamic civilization. Islamic civilization is committed to two basic principles. The first one is oneness of Allah and oneness of humanity. Islam does not allow any racial, linguistic, or ethnic discrimination. It stands for universal humanism. Besides, Islam has some peculiar features that distinguish it from other contemporary civilizations. Thirdly, the Prophet Muhammad was a member of a modest clan, the Hashim, which was part of a successful tribe, the Quraysh, in Mecca. He received a message from Allah through the angel Jibreel. As he told the message to others in Mecca, he found many followers. However, before long, the Prophet Muhammad was fighting with the power structure in Mecca, and his life was threatened. Luckily, he was able to migrate to nearby Yathrib, soon to be renamed Medina, and start a new life there. And for over a decade, Hazrat Muhammad helped the people of Medina organize a society. His influence brought peace and success to a town that had been struggling with disunity. Finally, after more than 10 years, Hazrat Muhammad returned to Mecca with 1,500 of his followers. Almost immediately, with virtually no fighting, Hazrat Muhammad became the spiritual and political leader of Mecca. His presence was so powerful that average citizens were converted to Islam in large groups. The origin of the Islamic civilization can be said that the Islamic Empire grew out of a small city in a region that was mostly desert, where the population had been almost entirely nomadic until shortly before the birth of the Prophet. In the time just before the Prophet Muhammad, the Arabian Peninsula was populated with polytheistic Semitic people. The Arabs of the region believed in the same stories of Adam and Eve, Abraham, Moses, but they had become interested in other gods over the years. People were living mostly in towns by now, but many were still nomadic, taking goods from the coast across the deserts to exchange. Hazrat Muhammad was a city dweller in Mecca. By the time Hazrat Muhammad was born, Mecca had long been a popular destination for pilgrimage. The Kaaba and its black stone was in Mecca, according to the teachings of Islam from the time of Abraham. The Prophet Muhammad was born in 571. His clan or family was Hashim, which was one of the less influential families in the powerful Quraysh tribe. The Quraysh had been nomadic until not long before Hazrat Muhammad was born, but in a short time they were able to establish themselves in Meccan society. Sadly, only a few months before Hazrat Muhammad was born, his father died. Then Hazrat Muhammad's mother died when he was only 6. At that time in Mecca, an Arabian child in this situation would normally have been sent to live with the nomadic Bedouin, but his grandfather claimed responsibility for the young boy. Again, tragedy struck only 2 years later when Hazrat Muhammad's grandfather died. Finally, his uncle Abu Talib adopted Hazrat Muhammad. This difficult early life had a lifelong impact on Hazrat Muhammad's thoughts. Abu Talib taught Hazrat Muhammad the trading business. He often traveled with his uncle on journeys that lasted several months. He learned everything from driving camels to managing the finances. Over time, thanks to his hard work and honest nature, Hazrat Muhammad earned the title Al-Amin, or Trusted One. And Hazrat Muhammad saw the need for social rules to promise women the right of inheritance. That's very important because before Hazrat Muhammad, there were no rights for women. And the rights for the marriage, including the ability to start a divorce action. Hazrat Muhammad wanted to work on his community, so he began to travel a nearby cave at Hira to meditate on these challenges. The cave was so close enough to Mecca so he could see the Kaaba from the cave while he was praying. On more than one occasion, Angel Gabriel visited Hazrat Muhammad at the cave. At Hira, the words of Allah were delivered to the Prophet by Gabriel, Jibrail. This is called the divine revelations, Wahi. The visits to Hira, which often lasted several days, changed Hazrat Muhammad from a hard-working, trusted leader who was often looked to by his community to help settle disputes into a teacher of spirituality who was the direct messenger of Allah. And lastly, the product of the divine revelations is the Qur'an. The messages in the Qur'an came to the Prophet Muhammad gradually over the course of many years. The 114 chapters here the chapters we call Surah of the Quran contain more than 6,000 ayats. At first, Hazrat Muhammad preached the revelations to his family and friends only. His wife Hatijah was the first woman to embrace Islam. His cousin Ali, who would later become his son-in-law and one of the most important leaders in the history of Islam, was the first child to embrace Islam. Abu Bakr, his friend, was the first man to do so. At first, revelations were about the faithful individual living in accordance with Allah. Then the message to condemn idolatry came to Hazrat Muhammad and most things changed. Finally, after 3 years of revelations, Hazrat Muhammad was commanded by Allah to become more publicly visible in his preaching. He spoke loudly in public about the shortcomings of idolatry and declared the oneness of Allah. Hazrat Muhammad was struggling to let more people hear the call from Allah. Around this time, he met a group from Medina. This group was happy to listen to Muhammad, partly because their town was a place with no leadership and little peace. By 222, most families in Medina were Muslim. Here we will talk about the Hijrah. In Turkish, we call Hicret. The Hijrah took place in 622 and was the second exodus of the Muslim community from Mecca. This time it was to Medina. This event strengthened Hazrat Muhammad's transition from preacher to a leader. He had practiced when he led people to Abyssinia, but this was much bigger mission. Before the mosque's prayer had been a personal experience. But in the introduction of the mosque's prayer became a social function where worshippers no longer had to hide. The call to prayer, azan, became an important symbol of the freedom to assemble and worship. The mosque also served as a school, a function in Islamic society that would be central to the success of Islam. The mosque also served as a shared meeting place and an office for the administration of the society. Now that the Hijrah was complete, it was decided that the beginning date for the Muslim calendar. So the Muslim calendar starts on September 23rd, 622. Starting on this date, the name of Yathrib was changed to Medina, or the city of the Prophet. The transformation of Yathrib and the construction of the mosque are examples of how Hazrat Muhammad transformed from preacher to a leader. There are 5 main characteristics that distinguish Islamic civilization from the others. The first one is Islamic civilization is based on the monotheistic Islamic faith that believes in the oneness of Allah, Almighty Allah. It's a civilization with a universal dimension. It's not associated with a particular geographic region, race, or historical era. It's an open civilization. Islamic civilization has happily incorporated good parts of other civilizations as long as they are not against the spirit of Islam. And it's a well-balanced civilization. It insists on a balance between the material and the spiritual life. And lastly, it will last as long as Islam exists. So long as it embodies the principles of Islam, the Almighty Allah will preserve it. This unique civilization will never wither away because it's not a national or racial civilization, nor does it run counter to human nature. There are some important developments in the timeline of the Islamic civilization. The first one is the history of Islamic civilization spans centuries. Medina is the capital of the first Islamic state. After his arrival in Medina, Hazrat Muhammad invited the elders of various religious groups and tribes and suggested the establishment of a city-state. All Muslims, Christians, Arabs, Jews then ratified constitutions of Medina. The pact transformed Medina into a small but first ever Muslim state in the world's history. The first four leaders who followed Hazrat Muhammad are known as the rightly guided caliphs. They were Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, and Ali. These leaders had the benefit of living with Hazrat Muhammad. In different dynasties and empires, Islamic culture affected the way of life of people. The footprints of Islam can be seen in nearly all countries in the world. And lastly, from the very early Umayyad dynasty from the 7th century to the Ottoman Empire in the 20th century, the Islamic lifestyle improved the lives of people. So there are some contributions of the Islamic civilization to knowledge and science, of course. This is from the Quran. The search for knowledge in Islam began with Hazrat Muhammad. His prayer was, Allah grant me knowledge of ultimate nature of things. The Sunnah also shows the importance of an emphasis on knowledge. Seek knowledge even if you have to go to China. Seek knowledge from cradle to the grave. Verily, the men of knowledge are the inheritors of the prophets. This is why every traditional Muslim city had a public and private libraries, and some cities like Cordoba and Baghdad had libraries with over 400,000 books. Scholars were held in the highest esteem in Islamic society. And in this table, you can see some Muslim contributions to some sciences. For the medical science, we can say Al-Razi and of course Ibn Sina are very important contributors to the science. As for chemistry, we can say the word itself comes from Arabic. It was al-kamr, and in English we know this alchemy. And the father of Arabic chemistry and its greatest genius were Jabir. And as for astronomy, the Muslim scholars believed the Greek idea that the earth was round, and they calculated the distance around the earth, accurately divided the earth in the 360-degree sections, and establishing latitude and longitude and a method of calculating position. And Abtusa was the greatest Muslim explorer. As for the decimal system, the Islamic scholars brought the idea of number 0 from the India and used it in decimal system. About 1400 CE, Al-Kashi invented decimal fractions a century and a half before Stephen began to use them in Europe. As for algebra, the science of algebra owes much to the Islamic civilization. Algebra is derived from Arabic al-jabr. It means binding together. Through the Greek origin, algebra was greatly expanded by Muslim mathematicians. When we need to assess Muslims' contributions to the world, we can say Islam is a superior civilization, attracted gifted individuals to its focus of opportunity. Beginning with the 8th century, it was the Muslim culture that became the focal center of the world progress, attracting Jews, Persians, Christians, and Turks to its fold. When there was no scientific activity in the world, Muslims picked up the threads of ancient science and technology and turned into a definite pattern of progress. And thus Islamic science and technology reaching Europe via Sicily, Spain, awoke it from the dark ages in which it was slumbering. Thank you for listening to our course.